From the Alex Trebek stage at Sony Picture Studios, this is Inside Jeopardy!
Hello and welcome back to Inside Jeopardy, your exclusive and official podcast destination for all things happening in the world of Jeopardy! I'm Sarah Foss, and I'm joined today, in June, by the one and only Buzzy Cohen.
Well, thank you for having me, Sarah. I have to say, as exciting as all of the Ben Chan and Masters of it all has been, it's nice to kind of get back to regular Virginia Jeopardy.
Yeah, simpler times. You know, we don't have a million games to review. We've just got one great week of shows.
We just get to enjoy each other, ourselves, and the great syndicated Jeopardy show.
And other shows are highlighting our show as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I mean, no spoilers here for you Mrs. Maisel fans. And I have to say, I am a marvelous Mrs. Maisel fan, but I've only made it through half of the last season. So when word came out that Jeopardy was featured at the end of the final episode, that they chose our little show to end it all, I was so proud.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks so much to one of the things that we cover sometimes in this podcast and definitely in the other podcast. This is Jeopardy, the story of America's favorite quiz show. And one of the big things is like, how or why is Jeopardy this touchstone, and what does it mean when Jeopardy pops up in Cheers, in
White Men Can't Jump,
Free Guy, a little
Golden
more recently.
Girls,
yes,
Charlie's Angels.
I mean, everyone shouts out the classics.
Even the new Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes,
I don't know if you know that, if you've seen it yet, but
I haven't seen it yet. But
there's a full category of clues that our writers helped curate because we wanted it to be authentic.
Yeah.
The specific categories that are going into that film. So if you didn't see it last weekend, get out and see it. I've heard wonderful things.
Sony synergy.
Little synergy. Jeopardy's everywhere.
I did hear a review of it that said all killer, no filler. About that. So anyway,
okay, but back to Maisel, yes.
I would say the thing that is most exciting for me is we get to see not just Jeopardy in Mrs. Maisel, but our pal Brad Rutter, who I just love.
He is back, and I was able to read his Vulture article
that was
because
great.
Even Brad was surprised. You know, they come to us months in advance when they ask for clips for things for various shows and movies. We never know if it will get used, how it will get used until it shows up on our screens. And so Brad was watching as well, and there he was in the ultimate tournament of champions. He makes it into Maisel history, and one quote I did want to take from that was him saying he's always up for playing Jeopardy again. And I know our listeners know we got this little thing called the JIT, the Jeopardy Invitational Tournament. I know many of you wondered, where's Brad Rutter? How was he not a part of Masters? And yes, Brad Rutter has made more money on Jeopardy than any other contestant in history. Those stats are so impressive. So what we now want to see is, how is Brad right now? Can he come to the JIT, competing against some other greats, and prove that he deserves a spot as one of the current greats in Masters next year?
I'm excited to see that. I miss seeing Brad on stage.
Yeah. You know who probably doesn't miss seeing him on stage? Ken Jennings.
Because
most times, with the exception of the GOAT, that those two ended up going head-to-head, Brad usually won. I think Ken came in second to Watson and Brad came in third. So technically he beat him in that one, but
I think they both lost.
Overall, they were losers in that one.
I do love Ken's quote on that until GOAT. He would say, always a bridesmaid, never a Brad.
Yes, love that so much. Yeah, always love when our favorite show, Jeopardy, makes it into anyone's living room. I have to say, everywhere I go, my daughter had a performance last week of The Wizard of Oz. She was Dorothy, and I ran into some lovely, supportive grandparents as we were leaving. I thought they wanted to talk all about my daughter, but no. They wanted to talk all about Masters.
Yes.
They wanted to talk about Ben Chan. They wanted to talk about Benedict versus Benedict. I mean, they are big fans.
Well, I just had a similar experience to you. I, as you know, recently got to appear on KTLA in the morning last week.
Speaking of seeing our favorite shows on our favorite shows, yes.
Yes. Well, so we were talking about the new podcast, what we were talking about, but these folks on this KTLA morning show are diehard Jeopardy fans. They knew everything that was going on. It's like they not only watch the show, but I feel like they are in our brains in terms of what we're talking about on this very podcast. They wanted to talk about Benedict versus Benedict. They were talking about how the hosting thing worked. It was just like, it was great to be with real fans that are really watching it all the time, and not just people who are like, oh, what's going on with Jeopardy because it popped into some news feed or something.
Yes. Well, having done hundreds of local news interviews over the years, you always knew when you went to a station and the person talking to you actually watched the show.
Yeah.
One, they could usually say Clue Crew. And two, they knew what the heck I did. Other people are like, so you write the clues?
So you're with that blue
Yeah,
dog, huh?
that's you. But it always is fun to
Yeah.
do those interviews with people who really love it. And that was a great interview. I'm not going to say I learned things, but I was like your proud sibling. Like every time
Aw.
you would respond, I was like, yeah, he knows it. He knows it. Yeah, tell him how it works, Buzzy.
Yeah, it was really great. And they were really excited. I mean, they all, I think, left that interview saying, I want to be the enabler. So Michael Harris, there are some local news folks
they were
who want
impressed with that. When you threw out that terminology, they were like, what? There's an enabler?
Yeah.
Yeah, he lives up to the hype, too, I'd say Michael Harris does.
100%. I actually offered to enable for the finals for Masters, but nobody took me up on that. I thought that would
Really?
be a fun little...
Well, we knew you were busy with your handy-dandy notebook.
I
That's the only reason.
was busy, yeah. I'll sit in and enable for fun one
If
day.
ever the enabler goes down,
Yes, if he's stuck in traffic.
we've got a backup for you, Michael. What do you say we dive into last week's games? Let's cue those beep boops. Well, we kicked off the week with returning champion Deandra D'Alessio facing Travis Lee and Niranjan Murali. It was a tight competition until Travis found that last daily double late in the Double Jeopardy round, adding $6,000 to his score, taking the lead heading into final. Deandra close behind in second, but unfortunately Travis unable to finish writing his response. Deandra secured her second come-from-behind win in a row, dressed just as fashionably as her first, I will say.
Yeah, it's funny to come after our Ben Chan experience of all these runaways. You know, we had 9 runaways in a row. Now we have 2 come-from-behind wins in a row. I identify with Deandra. I had plenty of come-from-behind wins. I also would love to talk about, we were just talking about the category, Who Was That Masked Man?
Yeah, this was one of those fun things where we were talking with Sony and they were like, we'd really like to put something together for the movie. You know, we've got Shamik Moore. He's one of the stars and he'd love to do something. And so I went to the writers and I said, hey, it's a quick turnaround. We want to shoot it like this week. And they said, you know, we just happen to have this category about various masked men that they needed one extra clue for, and it worked out perfectly. So they wrote the clue for Shamik. We were able to shoot that with him. And again, at the time, Sony was telling me, we can't tell you, we can't show you what the Jeopardy reference is, but Jeopardy is going to be a part of the movie, so it's even more cool if we have this synergy. So
Corporate synergy.
happy to make that happen. I haven't been able to see the film yet, but I am very
We should go
excited
together.
to check it out. Yeah, family movie night.
Yeah.
I like that idea, Buzzy. And back to this game before we move on to Tuesday. Travis did say in the post-game chat he would love a chance to play again, maybe a couples tournament. Apparently his wife is a force to be reckoned with. What do you think about that? How would you and Alicia do on the show together?
We would do great. Alicia is much better than me at a lot of the categories that I struggle with. She's one of these people who any celebrity, you show a picture and she knows their name and what they've been in. She's really, really good at that. And I know some celebrities, obviously, but when it's like off that kind of first tier, I have a
Sure.
hard time. She's like, oh, that's so-and-so. They used to date so-and-so. They were on this show. Da-da-da-da-da. She's very, very good. She has a great mind. Great with movies. Yeah, a lot of pop culture stuff. I'm a little more academic. We'd be a good team.
Too bad you're disqualified.
I'm I mean, not according to Michael Davies.
Not
Every
according
day
to Michael
he changes
Davies,
his
but
mind.
even KTLA said, you know, now that you
Well, that's 'cause I
have
told
been
them.
behind the curtain,
That's 'cause
you
I told
can't
them.
be back behind the podium.
I'm just trying to avoid embarrassing myself with this new breed of amazing
Oh,
Jeopardy
the
player.
super
I'm from a
champion
different
era.
age, you know.
Yeah.
It's like baseball players who used to drink a gallon of whiskey and then go out and play and have
Yeah.
big guts and could barely
Babe
run
Ruth.
around the base. Yeah, look
The
at Babe
Babe.
Ruth. Do you think Babe Ruth would be playing baseball today? Absolutely not. But anyway.
Okay. Well, heading on to Tuesday, Deandra went for her third win against Ilhana Redzovic and Nathan Dennis. Ilhana had a small lead heading into the Double Jeopardy round where she went on a tear, finding the last daily double, adding $5,000 to her total, but she was just short of securing that runaway. Fortunately for her, final was a triple stumper. I don't know when that's ever good news, but it was for her, and a small wager allowed her to get win number 1.
Disney endings. We've talked about our love of Disney fans.
Oh
the
my
Disney
goodness.
endings category.
When this category came up, I was like, I'm going to nail this one. And I did.
We still need to go on the Disney podcast. I haven't
know.
arranged that.
Do you
That's
think
on
our
me.
invitation still stands?
I think it does. This is probably more for that podcast than this one, but I don't know if you heard, but Splash Mountain is closed.
Oh, did I hear? I debated maybe just going for one last trip by myself, like leaving the family at home
Last
and
week,
just
yeah.
taking one more trip
One more dip.
down the log of doom,
The flume.
the flume of doom. But
I
didn't.
also really loved learning that Nathan had tried out 3 times, and 2 were in person, one of which was in Seoul. I just want to say out there, because I know we have a lot of hopefuls in the audience, so many of our great champions or just great contestants like Nathan took the test multiple times, spent years trying to get on the show. Arthur Chu, James Holzhauer,
Amy Schneider.
Austin Rogers. So many people, it took them, not everyone can be like me and get on the first time you take the test. But
Well, we actually had a recent champion who was asking Ken about that. He's like, so, how long did it take you? And he's like, well, I waited like almost a year. And he's like, no, like you never tried out? And Ken was like, no, I mean, the first time I tried out, like they waited almost a year to get back to me. And,
that's about where Ken and my similarities on the Jeopardy stage end.
No, come on now. You're selling yourself short. Well, heading into Wednesday, Ilhana returned to face Kyle Marshall and Lisa Gargiulo. It was a slow start for all 3 of our players, but Ilhana and Kyle battled back and forth throughout the Double Jeopardy round, splitting the daily doubles, working their way to 5-digit scores, heading into final. In that round, Ilhana opted for an unconventional 0 wager from the lead. This is what's so funny about these wagers. In that moment, people are like, what were you thinking? That's crazy. But then all 3 players end up being incorrect in final, and she gets the win.
I think that looking at this, you look at sports and movies, if you don't feel comfortable, if you feel like that is a category where you're not going to do well, then Ilhana clearly did the right thing. It's easy to feel overconfident, or just think of Final Jeopardy solely on the numbers. You also really have to take into account the category. I had a category in the Tournament of Champions that was history and music, and I felt really, really confident. And
that
I
is like in your
my wheelhouse,
one
and
would
I
think.
bet big on it. A lot of people were like, "What are you doing?" I was just like, I wanted to win. I wanted to make a statement. And I think on the flip side of that, when it doesn't feel like it's your category, sometimes a conservative wager makes sense, especially when the game is close like this. We saw some of this gamesmanship happening in Masters as well. Obviously, it's a different situation, but I also wanted to talk a little bit, if we may, about these low daily double wagers. Every time someone hits a daily double, I say bet it all. And I think we got to look at the statistics, but more times than not, people get daily doubles correct.
It seems they do, unless it's one of those people you're rooting for and they go in really big and then they miss it and you feel terrible. Now, when we're talking about Final Jeopardy, I did want to remind people the category sports and the movies. So that is something if you're a fan of movies and sports, both of them together. That could be a little intimidating if it isn't in your lane. The clue, a Gina Davis Institute study found shortly after a 2012 franchise film's release, women's participation in this sport rose 105%. Of course, we're reflecting on the Hunger Games. The correct response, what is archery? The Gina Davis Institute is an organization that we have worked with here on Jeopardy. They were thrilled with this Final Jeopardy clue to come up, and I loved this one. I thought it was a really creative way of, learning something in a clue. But pinning it in a way that you didn't have to know, that it rose 105%.
Totally. And I think where people could get tripped up if, you go into sports and movies, you start thinking about major, football, baseball, The Natural,
Field of Dreams,
the Bad News Bears,
Friday
all
Night
of this.
Lights. This
Mighty Ducks, all of this stuff, right?
These are the places I'm going.
Right, so this is where we're all going. Like I could see a Mighty Ducks clue where it's like the team, which is now the Ducks, was named after the film franchise, whatever it is. So you start going into those big national league sports and maybe forget about something like archery.
Yeah.
Some of the best advice Brad Rutter ever gave me was the worst thing that you can do on Final Jeopardy is when you see the category, is start to figure out what they're going to be asking.
Don't be a Jeopardy blind guesser.
When you're on the show, don't be a Jeopardy blind guesser.
Okay, interesting.
And it certainly has bit me in the butt a few times because this is one of those things where maybe you start rolling through Bull Durham, Tin Cup, You start going through Happy Gilmore, all these different famous sports movies, and it's totally
Hoosiers.
It's totally in a different Space Jam. We should stop.
Space Jam
White Man
2.
Can't Jump.
We should stop.
But it's really going in a different direction. So sometimes the best thing you can do is to try to keep your mind as blank as possible until that actual clue shows up. Deal with the material you're given instead of trying to create a list in your head that you're narrowing down.
But at home,
blind guess
go
away.
for it.
Absolutely.
It's super fun.
Sarah, I want to ask you, because this had a really fun category to this game, Andrew Lloyd Webber. Talk to me about that. What a legend.
What a legend. Yes. This was a happy and sad category all at the same time. One of the reasons that Andrew was in the States and able to do this category was that he was helping, prepare for the launch of his new musical, Bad Cinderella, which opened on Broadway in March and sadly is closing this week. So by the time the category was set to air, unfortunately, we knew that the show was closing. I had the chance to see the show on Broadway as part of, the research for the category. I sat in the audience actually one row behind Andrew, and It was when the show was still in previews. But to be feet away from Andrew Lloyd Webber watching his work on the stage, it's just a moment I will never forget. He is as much a perfectionist in, delivering clues as he is in creating these beautiful musicals over the years. And, he wanted to get it right. He would deliver it and then he'd say, oh no, I'm going to do it better. Here's a better one. And even when he did the clue about the Phantom of the Opera, he added a little thing at the end. He said, but the Phantom doesn't want to leave New York. So it seemed like he was almost teasing that maybe the Phantom of the Opera will come back. Interestingly enough, with Bad Cinderella closing on June 4th, it's the first time in 43 years that Andrew Lloyd Webber doesn't have a show on Broadway.
That's incredible.
Starting 4 decades ago with Evita, and then Cats and Starlight Express and Sunset Boulevard. And then, he did School of Rock. I mean, you forget how much he has done, but there'll be a hole in the heart of Broadway without Andrew Lloyd Webber for sure. But as he said, this is just goodbye for now. It is not goodbye. And it was really great to feature him on the show.
Hi, I'm Buzzy Cohen. You've heard me on Inside Jeopardy, breaking down stats, analyzing contestant plays, and reviewing key moments from recent games. Well, I'm hosting another Jeopardy podcast, but this one's a little bit different. Think less sports, more history. We'll be taking you on a journey from Jeopardy's beginning in the 1960s through the Alex Trebek years to its current-day super champs. For the last 60 years, we've been watching one show. Hear how it all came together on This is Jeopardy! The story of America's favorite quiz show. Out now from Sony Music Entertainment and Sony Pictures TV.
Moving on to Thursday's game with two-day champion Ilhana going up against Jared Watson and Eva Thomas. Ilhana and Eva both had impressive Jeopardy rounds, finishing with over $7,000, both of them, while Jared finished the round in the negative. But he really kicked it up in Double Jeopardy, 12 correct responses, working his way back into contention. From the lead, Eva was unable to come up with the correct response in final, but Jared was, and he caps off an exciting come-from-behind win, and we've got another new champion.
Yeah, I did enjoy in Jared's post-game chat when he was shocked after the win and said, I can't words right now. We've talked about this so many times, but it's
Yoda.
such a,
That's my husband often tells me I speak like Yoda, so I relate to you, Jared. I understand what you're saying. All right, we closed out the week with Jared facing Jong Lim and Sylvia Itzo Hunter. Jared shined throughout both the Jeopardy and Double Jeopardy rounds, 15 and 16 correct responses respectively in each of those. He was able to take a strong lead heading into final where he was the only one to come up with the correct response. This was not a come from behind. This was a nice, solid exclamation point on a second win to end the week.
Yeah, it just goes to show how sometimes you need a little bit of luck, but all of the players with the right material, the right amount of confidence, can really, really shine on this stage. And I just want to tell everyone, please wager big on your daily doubles.
Did you hear that? If you're listening and you're about to go on the show, we don't want to see you making those tiny daily double wagers.
Well, so, I say this and I have a strategic point of view here, which is that one, you've already played a couple of clues in the category, probably. You kind of get what the writers are asking for. You know where it is on the board, so you know the level of difficulty. You have a way more information than you do on Final Jeopardy. why not bet more there? And also there are more clues on the board. Bet more on these daily doubles. You can make it up than ending up in a close final and having to bet a ton of money and ending up, in a situation where, you may not be able to get it.
Yeah. So if any of you are listening and you go on the show and you bet big and you get it correct, you can thank Buzzy.
And if you bet big and you get it wrong, you can write me a strongly worded email that I will not read.
I also had to love Jared in the post-game chat. He's happy. He's heading into the weekend as a champion. He said, I'm just a dorkopotamus from East Texas. These things don't happen to us out in the country. And that this was just so far beyond his expectations. And, I loved that. In fact, we used it in the Open on the next show because a dorkopotamus from East Texas.
Yeah.
That was open gold, if you ask me.
Well, congratulations to Jared as he heads into the weekend as a Jeopardy champion. Now let's answer some viewer questions, shall we?
Okay.
Greg asks, when the judges return to an earlier decision and reverse it, as for instance when an answer is ruled correct after first being ruled incorrect, is such an action typically prompted by an onset protest by the contestant in question, or is the reversal of a ruling done because the judges themselves have come to a new understanding of the matter?
It's a well-oiled machine, beautiful orchestration that happens throughout our show. And not only do we have, the judges table consisting of producers and writers, but back in the library, as we've talked about, our writers and researchers work in a real library. That's where their offices are located. All of our researchers and writers who aren't on stage are watching the show from the library. We also have one of our writers off stage who has access, to the interweb, who is also online throughout the show. And so anytime a contestant gives a response that we were not anticipating, research begins in that second. Whether or not anyone is asking for it or prompting it, the research starts happening. So while the game is continuing, people are starting to look at those responses and do additional research to see if maybe that is just something that we hadn't anticipated someone would say, but it is also, in fact, correct. Now, what happens next is someone will alert, we need to stop. And oftentimes, Billy, our head writer, will also say, we need to stop because he knows, we need to give that a little bit of thought, not knowing what research has already been done. And the times to stop are obviously before a daily double. We always want to stop before that if possible, or any time we go to a break. So if that happens at any of those specific times, we then stop down and we check in. Okay, Billy will be on the phone with the researchers in the library. What have you found? Billy's pulling out his dictionary. We've got another writer, John Duarte, off stage. He's saying, I'm getting 1,000 hits for that word. And okay, let's go back in. Does it meet all of the parts of the clue? Yes, it works for that. Does it also work for this second part? And this is when Michael's involved and Lisa, and we're all kind of gathering as much information about it before we make a ruling. Then if it's decided, yes, it is in fact acceptable, then we'll notify the host. We'll let them know, okay, we're going to make this announcement before the daily double, or we're going to make this announcement, in the contestant interviews before we get into the round or before we start Double Jeopardy. And the interesting thing is that we don't want to penalize anyone unnecessarily. So let's say, our first contestant rings in, they give a response, the host rules them incorrect, someone else rings in and they are correct. Even when we go back in and we adjust the score, we don't take the money away from the person who also gave a correct response. Technically, had we stopped right in that moment and said yes, they wouldn't have gotten that money, but we don't go back in time and take that money away from them. So it really is, I don't want to say it's exciting when it happens because we never want that to happen, but I'm always really intrigued by the process and how precisely it all works and how we get to a good resolution as quickly as possible. And it's not that we make mistakes, honestly. It's just that sometimes, as much as you anticipate what someone is going to say, there are things you can't anticipate. And on the host script, as you know from when you hosted, there will be do not accepts that are words that are similar, but they do not meet the clue. And then there will be also acceptable.
Right.
And so sometimes, even the host will say, yes, kidney bean or fava bean. Like that probably would never happen. That was just off my top of my head.
Well,
but you know what I'm talking
about. I can give you an example.
Bessie can give me an example.
In my TOC, there was a picture of a sandwich, and it was starts and ends with H. And I couldn't really see the sandwich because, we're across the stage.
Yes, we have bigger monitors now.
Now. And I said ham sandwich because I saw some ham on there. But they were looking for a hero sandwich. Alex ruled me incorrect. When we stopped down tape, I protested. and they corrected and gave it to me. And afterwards, one of the researchers said, yeah, we had already discussed accepting that. But sometimes when you're in the middle of the game as the host, you're like, okay, that wasn't the response I was looking
Sure.
for. Things like that happen. And I also just want to say they mentioned, a situation like I just spoke about where a contestant protests. I've also been on stage where a contestant will protest another contestant's response.
Yes. And usually what happens in either of those scenarios is, one of our contestant coordinators will come over and say, this is what someone is saying. And then I'll usually get on the headset and share it with the people who need to know.
Right.
Oftentimes, we've already been doing the research, but it always gives them peace of mind to say, yes, we also questioned that. We looked into it.
Yep.
We did make the right call here.
Yeah, the one I remember, the question was asking for the character, and I said the Blair Witch. They protested because they said the name of the movie was the Blair Witch Project, but it was looking for the character, so they just clarified that with
Yes.
them. Yeah.
And another thing that happens is, in the moment, we all do this when we're speaking.
Sure.
You're sure that you said something.
Of course.
And someone will play it back for you, and they'll be like, no, you didn't. So oftentimes, a contestant will say, I said that. And we will, you know what? We've listened to the tape. And sometimes we'll play it to the floor so that
Right.
they can hear it as well.
Right.
Because that feeling. We're like, I would never have said that. It happened to James on one
Right.
of his responses
It was
in Masters.
incandescent and
Yes.
incandescence. And I was going to say these wordplay ones or a triple rhyme time. I had one where I added an S to one of the words so
Yes.
it no longer rhymes. These are the ones where it gets really in the weeds, and it can be
Yes.
tough to be a contestant and have those things rule against you when you're really going for it, and it's just like a letter off. But it happens.
It happens,
When
even to
we're-
the best.
And we're glad that Jeopardy cares so much to
We do.
really
Jeopardy cares.
be consistent.
We care.
All right. Well, Libby asks, I thought this was an interesting question. My family has a theory that once a player successfully buzzes in, they have some type of advantage on the buzzer. Any truth? I would say mechanically, no. There is no advantage to having just answered correctly on the buzzer. But what I think Libby is seeing is people going on runs, which happens because there is an advantage to having given the last correct response, which is you are selecting the next clue and category. You know where we're going, whereas if you're another contestant, you're having to catch up with what that next clue is. You also have just gotten some feedback confirmation that your buzzer timing is correct.
Yes. And I know the mental game of the buzzer, like when you don't get in, then you get in your head like, oh, I'm going in too early, I'm going in too late. And so you're right. When you are the first to ring in, you're like, okay, whatever I did, I'm going to do that again.
Exactly.
I've got this. The buzzer mojo, as James calls it.
Yeah, and while during the break, sometimes the contestant team will give you some advice about your buzzer technique or whatever. In the game, you don't know if you're too early or too late. And so I think that is part of what makes it hard to kind of break in when a contestant is going on a run of a couple of questions. So that's my feeling in maybe what people are experiencing. There's no change in how the buzzer responds. It's just the way the game works does give some advantage to the person who gave the last correct response.
Yes, and there's been, a lot of theory that that's why jumping around became so popular as
Right.
well, to just throw off your competition. You're correct, you're selecting again quickly, like you said. They don't know where you're going. They got to figure out, where did he just call from? What category are we in? And, you're halfway through the clue before you realize where we're at. So let's be honest. Be the first one to buzz in.
Yeah.
That works.
It's always good to be in control. It's always good to be in control. Well, that brings us to the end of today's show. I hope you join us next week for more gameplay discussion.
As always, subscribe to the podcast, rate us, leave us a comment, share across social, and follow us at Jeopardy on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on TikTok. And send us your questions to InsideJeopardyPodcast@gmail.com. We'll see you next week.
Hey, Ken, what's that thing the kids say?
You mean smash the like, subscribe, and bell button so you'll be the first to know when we upload more great videos?
Yeah, that's it. Do that.